Hi, I'm Joel Primus. I am the former CEO and founder of Naked Brand Group on NASDAQ, as well as the current CEO of Kosan Travel and the author of Getting Naked, the bare necessities of entrepreneurship and startup. In this episode of Leadership and Loyalty with Dov Baron, we talk about how biohacking may be the new cocaine for entrepreneurs. Is legacy a lie? Rewilding for clarity and just reconnecting with your body. We talk about how gentle warriors are more powerful than fearful warriors. And we talk about how entrepreneurship can be a journey of self-discovery. And when we go on that journey of self-discovery, it frees us to reach the most incredible heights of our own potential. So tune in and enjoy.
Welcome back to part two of our interview with Joel Primus. Now, I want to thank you for joining us here because this is part two of this interview. And in part one, we talked about what does it mean to be the upper level of leadership, and then what happens if it all falls apart. And are you willing to strip yourself naked psychologically to look at how you can come back, not be successful, but be more successful in a greater sense of it. As I said, our guest today is Joel Primus, and he was the founder of a NASDAQ-listed Naked Underwear, which was sold to Bendon Lingerie in 2018. He is a CEO again. He ran the most successful Kickstarter apparel company of all products of all time. Reaching nearly $1 million in sales in 30 days. He's also the author of a brand new book called Getting Naked, the Bare Necessities of Entrepreneurship and Startups. And he is an award-winning documentary filmmaker. So let's welcome back, Joel. Good to have you back on here, my friend. Loved our first part of our show. I'm looking forward to the second part. We've talked about the religion of hustle. We've talked about how the what was it, the hacking, the health hacking was really about has become the new cocaine. And we're looking at entrepreneurship as a journey of self-awareness, because whether you want it to be or you don't want it to be, it's going to be a journey of self examination. So walk us through a little bit about where this is, what you've laid out in the book, because I'm assuming the book came out of this journey that you spoke about in part one of realizing you're on the brink of a divorce, you've lost somebody you deeply love, you haven't seen your children, and you are, in quotes, incredibly successful on the outside, which is part of the terrible thing I deal with every day. Mm-hmm. So talk to us about what you've laid out in the book for people. So, because part of the challenge with books, and you can tell me if you agree, is that oftentimes they're written for the people who won't read them. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah.
Right. So it's like the person who needs to read this the most is the person who is in the cult of hustle to the max. They have drank the Kool-Aid and they really need to read this book, but they're probably not going to. But there are other people who are on the brink. They're in the cult of hustle, but they're thinking maybe something's off. Mm-hmm. So talk to us about what you've laid out.
Well, if somebody is in the cult of hustle, but they feel like something's off, that's a really good sign. It's a really good sign that they actually, the antennas, the intuition, all of it's going off and they recognize it. But sometimes there's just so much noise externally and internally that we just don't do anything about it. 1 year becomes 2, becomes 3, and to what we talked about in the first one, which ends up me in a hospital bed, somebody else in a divorce, somebody else just, financial ruin, just different things. And there's sort of this systemic issue that we've misconstrued hustle as and hard work. In other words, you can work hard, but if you ever turn it off, you're no longer working hard.
Yes.
Right. So, and that's just a complete falsehood. that it takes a long time to kind of comprehend. And I also believe in that process. There's a bit of a rite of passage. I think that, you know, the seasonality of our lives and our businesses,
Of course.
sometimes we got to go deep, like
Yeah.
into the well. But if we never come out of the well, and there's this book. Have you ever read The Denial of Death, or Death Denial, by Ernest Becker?
Yep.
You know, he talks about these legacy projects, as we work so hard to build a legacy that we have the illusion will remain, but in reality doesn't. It literally goes within a few years of our death, whatever we did. Maybe there's a plaque on the wall somewhere. And the problem with it is not, again, we misconstrue legacy and purpose. Purpose is the present moment commitment to what we feel called to as a business person, as an artist, as a creator, as a parent, being in the present moment and working on what you think is your purpose, versus needing that purpose to sustain you after death, you know, to sustain your identity. And what I see now is that legacy issue is trickled into, like, every Instagram post is about the legacy issue. Every YouTube video update is about the legacy issue, but it's in real time. It's like we're trying to preserve ourselves in the real time, and it's utterly exhausting and unfulfilling for so many. And we get caught in this trap. And the big driver of it is, you know, one, this concept that we've been sold, the concept of hustle, the concept of success. And every rich person who has a ton of money on this show and everywhere knows that it doesn't buy happiness.
No.
It's whatever. It's, everyone says that. It's true, right? It does not buy happiness. It buys some convenience, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And so we've bought into these concepts, and we think that if we don't live these concepts, we're not going to have a good life. And what I see so much is driving it, is the insecurity that, oh, if I don't do this, nobody's going to like me. I'm not going to have a good life, because you've built this foundation on a house of lies, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not making sense, don't just cut me off. But so we come out of the world, and we've got all these insecurities, and we've got all these concepts baked into our, as you said, our coconut.
Mm-hmm.
And then for a while, it's fine. We're hustling. We're out there exploring our lives. We're doing our business, and it's all fine. And then it starts to not be fine. Then you start getting in more fights with colleagues. You start to self-sabotage your business partnerships. Your marriage unravels. You know, you're firing employees that you didn't need to. You start to see this, and at first you don't know why. And this is back to the getting naked part.
Right.
This is when we start to look inside, and we start to ask ourselves the question, why? And then we ask ourselves the question, why again? And we keep going deeper into the why to get back to this life that I've created, and how I operate, and how I show up into it. Why is that? So to make a long story short, to give an example of this, for those who are like, wow, that was like taking a hammer to the head. I used to be a runner, and I was decently good. I represented Canada internationally.
Right.
And I had constructed this identity of success and hard work and notoriety as a runner.
Yes. Of course.
And then I tore my Achilles, and I lost my scholarship, and I lost my place on Canada's world team. And I had this massive hole of, like, well, where do I get that fulfillment from?
Yeah.
And so it just kept rearing its head, and, well, I'll just work harder and naked. Well, I'll just do this. Well, I need that pretty girl to think I'm sexy. I need all these things to fill that void. And when I realized that, it still took 5 years of work, like internal work with coaches like yourself, to realize that that was affecting my decision making and everything I did. And maybe I'll stop there because I've been
Well,
going.
you brought up something that I think is really important for us all to pay attention to, which is something I've spoke about many times here on this show, which is identity as an addiction. Identity is an addiction, and the problem with it is that the heroin addict. When I first moved to Vancouver, is part of what I've done in my life. I went to Hastings Street, which, as you know, is, there's part of Hastings Street that's a bit dark, to say the least. And it's full of homeless people and people doing drugs, and it's pretty dark. And when I first moved here, I purposely went there every night. Well, not every night, probably 3 or 4 nights a week. And I would sit in the back alleys with the drug users. I wasn't using drugs. I would talk to them. I wanted to find the humanity. I believe in the humanity of humans. And how many times did I have the conversation with somebody and saying, do you know cognitively, do you know this shit's going to kill you? Those are my exact words. And the exact words were, of course, I'm not an idiot.
Yeah.
As they stuck the needle in their arm and then vomited on themselves and fell on the floor. Okay. This is no different than the person who is on the treadmill running, or the not even a treadmill, it's actually a bloody hamster wheel that they're running on. They know they're on the hamster wheel. They know the shit's killing them. They know their marriage is on the brink. They know they haven't seen their kids in a while. They know their health is in the toilet. They know they're drinking too much to cope. They know they're not sleeping enough, but they keep running. And what I'm hearing you say is that you've got to stop, but how? Because this is what you're laying out in the book, and I want people to get that. I understand that they're going to get your journey, but how do they go, hold on a second, let me at least put the brake on for a minute, jump off the wheel to consider? How do you get them there, Joel?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know about your experiences, but in my experiences, it's never going to be me who gets them there. It's going to be their, that idea that until the prospect of not changing is so much worse that they just have to, right? So in my case, the marriage on the prince, I could not play the game any longer. Otherwise, the marriage would end. I had no choice. I had two choices: lose the marriage or change.
So
Right?
was it that? And that's why I want to ask you, because a lot of people are like, yeah, lose a marriage. All right. So was it losing the marriage, or was it the death of your friend? Or was one stronger than the other, or was it compounded?
It was compounded.
Right.
Absolutely. Right. Um, in some ways, the fact that it happened so shortly after just helped tip the scales in the right direction. So in some people's case, maybe they realize they're, the alcohol's too much, and they actually have a scare with a heart attack, or, they go to rehab, et cetera, and they know they have to make that change. That's the point of which I don't think I can convince anybody prior to that moment, right? Whatever that is for that person, the person, the junkie, or the heroin user, it's not the heroin. It's maybe there's a personal relationship in their life, or something else that makes them realize they need to change.
Yeah.
Right. But once that happens, once they have that, and all of a sudden they start to listen a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
the how begins with one thing, right? And then it becomes other things. You can look beyond. And so for me, again, I'm like, I realized over the course of the next year that I had massive self-worth issues. Self-worth predicated 100% on other people. And how does that show up in the workplace? it didn't matter if it was leadership, talking about leadership. I'm a bad leader because if I don't have self-worth, I'm compromised in my ability to lead others to their greatness, to their own success. And I went all the way back to, where did this idea of self-worth come from, or lack of self-worth come from? See it, come to terms with it. Obviously, I described it before.
Mm-hmm.
And then create a new wiring, a new thought process in my mind as to when that starts to rear its head in my interactions with you. Oh, Dov, what if you don't like me? What if this is your worst interview of the year? Seeing that conversation come up,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to, okay, I'm going to take a breath. I'm going to retell the story of, I know where that came from. It's not true. Here's how it is. Here's how this is going to go, right? Whether or not Dov liked this interview has no bearing on my, on my worth as a human being. Extrapolate that to the business deal. Extrapolate that to anything else you're doing in your life. That's what I had to do, because it reared its head 5 times a day, sometimes 10, sometimes 15, where I would find myself acting negatively because of self-worth issues, right? Okay, tick the box on self-worth. Now I know how that's showing up in my business, decision making, and if I fight with my wife, I'm seeing the pattern. What's next? What's the next thing
Right.
that I got to dive into? And so it's this unraveling process, this unlearning process of the bad habits up here that we've created, that once we start to see them, we still have the very challenging task of unlearning and teaching ourselves and rewiring ourselves in a new direction.
Yeah, because there's that point of getting to the realization that so we talked before about writing a book for people who won't read it. Okay. And of course, we can take that as a given. All right. So now we're getting people to read it who are on the brink. And those are actually the ones we're really aimed at, which is the people who go, I've got to change.
Yeah.
But oftentimes that in itself is a stumbling block, is I've got to change, but I don't know how. Well, the answer for me at a simple level is get help. You can't do it on your own. A fish cannot describe water. You are blind to your own shit. I understand that. But structurally, you've laid out some things in this book that allow people to go, here's where you can start. Right?
I get it now. I definitely missed that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so for me, I think I did mention I got a coach. First thing I did, I got a coach. I went to counseling simultaneously. Not one and not
Yeah,
the
they're
other.
not one or the other. No.
I did some shamanic journeying. Um, Admittedly with and without plant medicine.
Yep.
Because I don't believe that ayahuasca is the savior of my life, or anybody's for that matter. But to the point is,
But
like,
another
again,
$1,000,000 wasn't going to save your life either.
exactly. So I put all this framework around me, and I even told people, call me out, friends. Like let's say hypothetically, you got Fortune 500 CEOs on here. You can afford a coach. Don't cheap out, but it's worth every penny. But if you can't, your friends can be the mirror, right? Your friends can be the mirror, as long as a good friend
A
can
good
mirror
friend
that,
doesn't come with a smoke machine. They're not going
right?
to blow smoke up your skirt. They're going to tell you the truth, right?
Right.
That's a good friend. Now, you may
Exactly.
have good acquaintances who'll tell you how wonderful you are, but those are not real friends.
Mhm.
You can't trust the people who won't tell you the truth.
Exactly. So tell them, listen, like I had a group of friends, and I would say, and Dr. Jason Gordon being one of these people, I have insecurity issues. This is where they came from. I'm starting to see how have I shown up in our relationship with these things? And going forward, if you see me acting a little bit this way, call me out on it, right? My wife and I, an absolute rule to call each other out, not in a confrontational way.
No.
Look, I think this is what's happening right now. Let's unpack, right? And in that way, every moment is a teacher for you, right? You're presenting, you have so many beautiful opportunities to do that rewiring, do that reprogramming based on the gift of the people in your life.
But again, you can't do it on your own. And it does require sometimes a therapist, sometimes a coach, often both, and sometimes more than one. But it also requires the courage to fire your circle. That's what I talk about. Because if you've inadvertently, not consciously, surrounded yourself with people who are going to blow smoke up your ass, that's not going to help you. Or if you've surrounded yourself with people who are sycophantic to you, who are going to yes to you because you are the person who writes their paycheck, you have to understand there's always going to be a bias. I tell CEOs and C-suite individuals that I work with, and I go, who's the person you answers directly to you? They go, this person. I go, okay, what's their number one job? And they go, to do this. And they go, no, it's not. Their number one job is to keep you happy. And they go, no, it's not. And I go, yeah, it is, because you write their check. You decide if they get to pay the mortgage this month.
Yeah.
Right? So, and that's never been more true than it is today. So you've really got to be clear that you have to have that objectivity. You have to have that. And in a really great marriage, I have the same agreement with my wife. Neither of us, we have fully agreed, it's in our wedding vows, we will not try and change each other. Not at all. It's a disaster waiting to happen. But we will always call each other to be our very best, determined by us. So my wife will say, well, you told me you wanted to be this. Do you feel like you were that in this position? And I was like, no, I caught it, but thank you very much. She's not asking me to change. She's calling me out on a behavior that's not aligned with that vision I'm holding of myself. And that's exactly what you're talking about. But that takes an enormous amount of courage and an enormous amount of commitment. But from your philosophy here, because it's naked and what we need in entrepreneurship, the necessities of what, do you see that if you're going to be a really, truly successful entrepreneur, you have got to get naked emotionally, mentally, strategically with yourself? Or can you do it without it?
Therein lies the $1 million question. So again, that comes down to your definition of success, because you can be financially successful and disregard this entire conversation. With yourself, with us, with whatever. You can make money. Money is about is a byproduct of the energy that you're putting towards creating that money, but that doesn't mean you're happy. We said that, right? And so I reevaluated. I was making very good money. I had all these things and I wasn't happy. So I knew that was not my definition of success, and I knew that there would be trade-offs. And you're right. I love that you use the word courage, because courage is facing a known enemy. And then if the known enemy is yourself, then courage is facing yourself, not ignoring yourself. That is not courage. That is cowardice, right?
Yeah.
And so it does take a measure of courage, and courage there to kind of, we talked about mirroring people and coaches and having them, call you out, your wife, your partner, etc. Success, there's a momentum that happens along once you're down this path, right? When you learn to trust yourself, when you learn to realize that you can think differently, that you can act differently. So, it's like the first workout of trying to lose weight or trying to get in shape, or the first week is fine. You're motivated. The second week is where it's probably going to tank if you're not into it. But if you got through the second week, you start to believe in yourself in this new way in this third week. And so I always say, like, there's that initial phase where it's really kind of tough, but you get into the habit and you start building success around this new way of thinking, layering on things that align with this new value system, this new way of looking at your life. For me it was um, less drinking. For me it was more commitment to meditation. For me it was actually taking 7 days off, which had not happened in a decade,
Yeah.
right? And then realizing after that thing happened, oh, that's okay, that worked, I can do that,
Yeah.
right? Versus telling yourself the story you can before. And so
Mm.
there's an action that follows the idea that we do this, and the more that we are successful in that action in little bits, the more it becomes part of us and our life, and it reshapes us towards the future. And so for those who, for some people it's rock climbing, for other people it's the gym, it's yoga, it's whatever it is, but picking something that makes you feel good physically alongside that journey of self-discovery is so critical. Rest makes you feel good physically. Exercise makes you feel good physically. And it just shifts the dial in the right direction.
Yeah. It's really, really great message. We're going to finish up in just a couple of minutes. And I just want a really quick for people to have a grasp with this idea of rewilding, right? Because I love that term.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really great way for people to say, okay, here's a step in. What's a rewilding in daily habits?
In daily habits.
Well, in any way, certainly,
Yeah.
but certainly in daily habits. But just give us a brief understanding of what rewilding is and how we can sort of step into that this might be the way to. Oh, okay, I could go there.
Yeah. So that definitely plays off of what we just said, Dog, where this is maybe that thing for you is the rewilding versus the yoga, right? You don't have to do it all. And so I got this call, I want to say 6 months after I'd had this change, and my cousin who lives way up north. If I live in the boonies 90 minutes from Vancouver, I don't know where he lives is qualified as. Right? And they have this remote cabin that used to be like a trapping cabin, but it's just sitting there and they don't trap, anymore. And so he's like, you got to come up. And I had been so removed from nature for so long, living in New York, constantly on planes, big cities, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to truly be in nature.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so we started to do these trips 2, 3 times a year where not some little hiking trail, you know, like walking up the side of a mountain to the top and then using a GPS to find our way around. And I noticed this energetically, away from all the technology, my energy increased fivefold, right? Just
Mm-hmm.
that feeling of energy in my body. Day 2, totally, in the wild. Um, and then day 3 or 4, I started to notice this unbelievable clarity in my mind. A clarity that you can kind of touch on when you go for a hike, and it's kind of there, but after a few days, it's like the nature cleanses you. And then in terms of rewilding, is even going one step further. Admittedly, we did some hunting, and instead of buying cow meat, we stocked our fridge with bear meat, and
Sure.
and so starting to get in touch with my ability as an animal, as a human animal, to survive in nature and be part of nature just gave me this energy and this confidence in myself. And so that was part of the reason my wife and I moved back to the farm. And if we look at it like, sure, I do these big kind of remote things as a way of rewilding and re-getting in touch with my instinct and my power, just my physical power. Hiking up a mountain and sleeping on the ground shows you how powerful and adaptable you are as a human, and you carry that strength and that confidence. But you can't do that all the time. So the farm was a way for us to just always have that ability to just, okay, done some emails, stressful phone calls or whatever, survived a podcast with Dov, and and
a moment of rewilding. I survived it. Survived a direct encounter with Dov Baron on his podcast.
Little does anyone know, right? But just to get outside for 2 hours and put my hands in the earth with our garden, our vegetable garden. I know it sounds kind of hokey, kind of like Shawshank Redemption when he's out in the rain, but just standing in the rain and just listening, just being quiet, not trying to Instagram the moment, which I've definitely tried to do, right? Let's see if this translates to to a story. And it just helps balance everything a little bit more. It just connects you with the parts of yourself that get pulled away in this digital world we live in. And so it's not a science, it's an art. you know?
Exactly.
So,
And it's a subjective art, so you've got to really examine yourself. Joel, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for your time, for your commitment, for your rewilding of yourself, and sharing with us about what it means to really get naked. And so please, again, tell our audience where they can find out more about you, your book, all your writings, and all the resources that you have, and how to find out more about you, generally speaking.
Yeah, joelprimus.com is where my book is, where my blog is, and my movie that's coming out about traveling with your kids, another podcast conversation. And Amazon is where you can get Getting Naked, the bare necessities of entrepreneurship and startups.
Is the documentary RaisingGlobalCitizens.com?
RaisingGlobalCitizensFilm.com, but there should be a
film.com. Okay, good. Well, we'll make sure that we post all of those, including some of your social media links as well, inside of the show notes. It's been a pleasure and honor, sir. Thank you for being with us. Hope you'll stay with us to the end. For you, dear listener, remember that you can hang out with other conscious leaders. You could chat about this episode or any past episodes inside of our LinkedIn or Facebook groups. Just look for the Leadership and Loyalty podcast. It doesn't matter how successful you are. If your employees and your customers don't understand what gives your company meaning, you're only working at a fraction of your capability. To find out more about how you can hire me, Dov Baron, as a speaker or leadership strategist for yourself or your organization, go to dovbaron.com. That's DOVBARON.com. Because unified, actualized meaning is the one single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness in all individuals and companies. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about what might happen if you got off that wheel and you got a little more emotionally, mentally naked, so that you could have a higher level of success in the context of fulfillment, not just a bank account. I'm Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness, to find your deepest meaning, to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.